If you were to move at God's pace, how fast would you be moving? You probably wouldn't be frantically fretting and fuming about. You'd be moving steady, working hard, but going with the natural flow of the world. The best thing I've read on making that point comes from Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking, where he essentially dedicates an entire chapter to moving at God's pace. Now, we live in a world that is a little bit more secular than Peale's world was, where people have lost a bit of their religious sense, but I think all the lessons still apply. And so if God doesn't work for you, maybe think of the organizing principles of the universe, the things that structure and order reality, as having the same domain as what Peale is referring to as God here. And so I want to read a quote that really ties together the emphasis of that chapter. Slow down, for whatever you really want will be there when you get there, if you work toward it, without stress, without pressing. If proceeding under God's guidance in his smooth and unhurried tempo, it is not there, then it was not supposed to be there. I'm a big believer in authoring your own reality, in the influence you can instill on the world, but what Peale is cautioning us against here is trying to do too much. Trying to do something that can't come about, that you're not going to brute force your way into reality. And if it's not there when you want it to be there, perhaps it was never meant to be there in the first place. Now, as I said before, Peale is essentially trying to use religious faith in a practical manner, and he really does a good job of that throughout the entire book. Another way he assesses the problem of dealing with this pace comes from another quote in that chapter. A first step is to reduce your pace, or at least the tempo of your pace. We do not realize how accelerated the rate of our lives has become, or the speed at which we are driving ourselves. Many people are destroying their physical bodies by this pace. But what is even more tragic, they are tearing their minds and souls to shreds as well. Now, Peale wrote this book in the mid-20th century, where he felt the pace was already too much. We live in a time where that pace is much faster, where technology is accelerating it. And we can ask ourselves, how did this happen? How does pace keep growing if even people in the mid-20th century were seeing that we're already moving too fast, and yet we've accelerated way beyond that? Jonathan Pageau, a popular YouTuber, has a great idea on why that's happening, which revolves around credit. His main point is that credit is borrowing against the future for today. Now, there's all different reasons you might do that. A lot of really smart business cases for borrowing in that sense to make an even better future. But I want to stick with the point in that limited scope, because normally what you'd think is that you sacrifice today for a better tomorrow. But through credit, we're sacrificing tomorrow for a better today. We're getting something now based off the perceived value we can provide, or something else can provide, tomorrow. Now, what Pageau says that's maybe a little bit more spiritual is that by doing that, we're pulling the future closer to ourselves. So since we've made this contract with the future, we're essentially accelerating our pace towards it. And that's happening because we are paying back the value that we've got from the future, plus interest. Everything with credit comes with interest. So we have to not only live up to that future, but live up to beyond what we'd expect to pay off the interest. And I think there's another good quote from Peale's book that sort of explains how that pace is bad for us. It is impossible to have peace of soul if the pace is so feverishly accelerated. God won't go that fast. He will not endeavor to keep up with you. He says, in effect, go ahead if you must with this foolish pace, and when you are worn out, I will offer my healing. But I can make your life so rich if you will slow down now and live and move and have your being in me. God moves slowly and with perfect organization. So I want to take a practical tip on how we can more move with God's pace, or know that we're moving with God's pace. And I'm going to take this from Scott Adams, who's actually heavily influenced by Norman Vincent Peale, and I would make the argument is a further abstraction away from God of a lot of Peale's lessons, relying more on psychology and science and personal anecdotes. But what Scott Adams would say to do is to manage your energy and not your time. And I think this ties in closely with what Peale is saying, because if you have energy that allows you to go fast, yes, go fast, but don't go fast when your energy is low. Move with that flow of life, and you're moving more at God's pace. Some ways Scott Adams would make examples of this is to say, well, if you have creative work and you have grunt work, do the creative work when you have the most energy. Do the grunt work when you have the least energy. Don't just schedule them and regardless of your energy, do them at that time. No, do them at your energy, not a specific time. And there's a big mind-body connection coming from both Peale and Scott Adams. So first I'm going to read the quote from Peale, where he says, "It is also true that the mind can be quieted by first making the body quiet. That is to say, a physical attitude can induce desired mental attitudes." Which feels really correct to me and shows up also in Scott Adams, where he's saying you have to set your body right for your mind. So some examples he'll give here is, if you don't want to go to the gym, put on your gym clothes. Maybe you don't go, maybe you just drive down to the gym, but you're sending your body in the place to feel the energy to do the exercise. If you don't want to get up, you have a bunch of chores to do, but you feel just stuck, like you don't want to move, well, start by just moving your pinky. And then maybe the rest of the body will follow. Or if you're doing some large task, like going back to school to get a new degree that feels daunting and overwhelming, well, maybe you can just do some research. Maybe you can just see what the application fee costs. But do something small that gets your body and then your mind in the right place to accelerate on that energy. So, in recap, we're looking at three thinkers: Norman Vincent Peale, Jonathan Pageau, and Scott Adams. And the track of the idea is that God, or the universe's pace, is slow and steady, or rather comfortable and steady. The pace of our modern world is much too fast, and that's due to our over-leveraging of credit and technology. And then the way you can combat this is to manage your energy so that you're not a victim to our accelerating time. But I want to end the video on the 6 principles that Norman Vincent Peale lays out in this chapter called Stop Fuming and Fretting. He uses a lot of biblical quotes. I'm basically going to whittle them down to the smallest possible part of the lesson, so you can keep these things in mind if you're ever starting to feel way too anxious or worried. And of course you could read Norman Vincent Peale's book as well, but I want to give you the simpler version since you're here with me now. So here are his 6 principles to relax your body and then your mind. First is to sit, relax, and affirm your relaxation. So say things like, "I'm so calm right now." Right? Your words, your thoughts can trick your body or help your body into feeling things that you want to feel. Second is to visualize your mind as maybe something like a body of water, and that there is a storm coming and it's moving you and shaking up all the waves, but now that's past and you're calm and tranquil. So take yourself out of your body, imagine yourself as something else, and imagine that thing as calm. Third is to relive peaceful memories. Go back in your mind to a place where things were peaceful. Imagine that. Visualize that and see the effect it has on yourself. Fourth is to think of tranquil words. Just anything like calm, relaxation. It's a little bit from similar to the first point. I will say Peale kind of repeats points, but this gets at a point that Scott Adams brings up about mental shelf space. So you can only think of so many things at one time. If you have a bunch of negative things, try to push them off the shelf with some positive things. And here Peale is saying push them off the shelf with some relaxing things, some calming things that you can think of instead. Really, all 4 of these points so far have attack the problem of mental shelf space. 5th, remember previous times where you're anxious. Didn't it all work out? Wasn't it not so bad? Every single time you can think of, like, oh my God, I got so much work to do on Tuesday. Do you remember that Tuesday? You probably don't. So don't worry about it. It's going to be the same again this time. And then lastly, here I have to use the Bible quote because there's really no way to simplify this. And I believe it's from Isaiah. And he says, "Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee." And here he's saying, think of God. It'll keep you in perfect peace. You can think of whatever your higher being or higher calling is. And hopefully that gives you perfect peace as well. But you want to think of it as active words that are permeating your mind, actually forcing that peace upon you. So, I hope you have a nice, relaxing day. Thanks.